Hello, friends, and welcome back to this week's episode of Thank You, Come Again. This week, I've got the privilege of being joined by an amazing CX leader for one of the leading Shopify brands. He's also a fellow San Diegan and a former collegiate athlete. It's Dan Brady, Customer Success Manager over at Pura Vida. Dan, welcome to the show, man. How are you?
Blake, thanks for having me. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's another great day in San Diego, so I can't complain. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation, really diving in with you on all things CX.
Yeah, thanks again for having me and looking forward to our conversation.
Of course. And so today, Dan, we're going to be chatting about something that is critical to the success of customer retention, and that is building and maintaining a high performing customer experience or CX team. We're going to dive into what it takes, what are best practices, and then also, I think, learn from some of the lessons that you've learned along the way and really building this out over at Pura Vida. But first, I got to ask, who is Dan Brady and who is Pura Vida?
Sure. Well, a little bit about me. So, like you said, my name is Dan Brady. I've been the customer success manager here at Pura Vida for over 2 years now. Of course, we're in the middle of our Black Friday, Cyber Monday post madness. So it's our busy time of the year. A little bit about me. I started my career in sales. I did that for about a year or two and quickly realized I didn't love what I was doing. So I made the transition over to customer success, and luckily I found my niche, and I've been really enjoying what I do. About Pura Vida. Pura Vida started off as a direct to consumer brand, most notably for selling string bracelets like you see here. And we've expanded our products quite a bit over the years. The company is about 12 years old now. So, in addition to bracelets, we sell a lot of jewelry. We also sell apparel, bags. And this year has been pretty monumental for us. We've opened about 5 retail stores. So, we started off as a cool direct to consumer brand, but now we've expanded, and we have a wholesale presence, and of course we also have numerous retail stores now too, which is exciting.
That's super exciting. Yeah, it's been really really cool to watch the Pura Vida brand grow. Over the years, during my time at San Diego State, kind of got familiar with the brand. I know some of the founders have ties to SDSU, but also, during my time at Attentive, I think too, like getting to see, what Pura Vida has done with the SMS channel and watching that side of it, and it's crazy all the local ties that we seem to have here. But even like the stores. I mean, I've been to the UTC store here in San Diego, and so it's really great to see the expansion not only on the DTC side, but now retail as well. So really excited to dive into a lot of we have a lot on the plate today. We're going to try our best to cover off on a lot. But I kind of wanted to just start with some background more on CX and kind of understand. You talked about how you really got into CX and starting in sales. It's a really interesting kind of trajectory that you've had. When you ask kids, as they're growing up, or students as they're graduating college, from school, I don't think many of them will say that they really want to work in customer experience. I think it's, we're certainly seeing more careers open up in this space as CX becomes, obviously it's been a major factor in, retail and DTC for quite some time, but we're starting to see more stories come out now, an emphasis on this idea of a CX leader. And I'm curious, like, how did you get into customer experience? You mentioned kind of having this sales background, but what was that evolution sort of like for you?
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, I know when we were doing prep leading up to this conversation, that was something that we had joked about that, yeah, customer experience is not really taught in schools at all. And if you ask people who are either entering college or in college or any type of formal, education, I don't think anyone says, hey, when I grow up, I want to be a customer experience or customer success leader. And it's a shame because it really is a great industry to be in. And I'm super happy to be involved in it. But people might say, hey, marketing or finance or business, but customer experience, I think, is definitely a huge part of any business success. And I'm really happy to be working in this industry. Now, yeah, with that said, when I first moved to San Diego, I was working sales, and I was working for a startup company that actually sold supplements. And so I was doing phone sales, selling supplements, either cold calling or trying to upsell people. And after maybe about 6 months of doing it, I just wasn't really thrilled. I have great respect for salespeople, and it's certainly not the easiest job. And for me, I just wasn't super passionate about it. And so luckily, I loved the company I was at the time, and they had some openings on their customer service team. So I was willing to make a lateral move into the customer service department and, dip my feet in there and see what it was all about. And I just quickly really enjoyed what I was doing. I'm very much a people person. I like speaking with people. I like helping people, and I guess the rest is history. After I was doing that for a while, I was able to work my way up from entry level into a senior role, and then eventually a team leader role. And about 2 years ago, I was very happy with my employment at the time, but I saw Pura Vida was hiring a CS manager, and I threw my name into consideration. And very fortunate to have gotten the opportunity. And for the past 2 years, I've been leading the CS team here at Pura Vida, and very happy with where I'm at career wise, and happy to be working for a great company like Pura Vida.
That's an awesome story, and I think it really what you said is very true. Like when I think about my time in college and business school, like we never really learned about customer experience, customer service, customer success, any of those different things, and they're so fundamental to business. Not just DTC or retail, like literally any business. Having some of those fundamentals. Obviously, everyone focuses on marketing, finance, but it'd be really interesting to see, in the future of education, where this could go. I definitely think, we're starting to see, this career path become more and more, just more exposed, I think, to the broader kind of business world. So I think it's a very, very great point. And to kind of dive in, I think, to now some of like your philosophy on customer experience, to getting into the fundamentals a little bit more, of really building a team, but also understanding how you've approached this. Even I think many great teams start at the top with leaders, and the CX team and modern e-commerce is really, again, starting to get more spotlight here now, and I think obviously for good reason. And I think you're truly at this outer ring of the organization. You're interacting, you're building customer relationships, you're embodying the voice of the brand, collecting and relaying customer feedback, and so much more than I even mentioned there. But to say, having a strong CX leader matters, I think is an understatement. And I'd love to just have you talk broadly about your philosophy and approach to customer experience, and what do you think makes for a great CX leader?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think at its core, and then this just it's not only for CS or CX, but I think a lot of things that you're seeing now when it talks about being a great leader, I think having empathy is super important, and especially for CS and CX leaders. So I always try and be empathetic when I'm leading our team, and of course when I'm interacting with our customers. I think having a great deal of empathy is a key piece of success for any good leader, especially in CS and CX. And aside that, I think you have to be decisive, and you have to have good communication for your team. So I think if you talk to any CX leader, they'll tell you that it's super important, especially if maybe you're leading a remote team. You have to have great communication. Via Slack, via Zoom, via Google Calls, whatever form of communication you use for your teams. And of course, the same can be said if you have an in-house team or you're leading people in person. Being able to quickly make decisions and communicate that to the team, right? As much as we'd love for things to go smoothly all the time, that's not always the case, right? And so anytime you have fires or situations that you need to address, you need to be able to quickly solve problems, communicate this to your team, make sure there's alignment, and make sure there's no questions or anything that needs to be clarified, because you have to give all the customers the same experience. And I think being able to identify these problems, effectively communicate that to your team, set that proper expectation, I think that's super important. So going back to your question, I think having empathy is super important as a CX leader. Being able to quickly identify and solve problems is super important. Being able to effectively communicate, not just problems, but in general, being able to communicate effectively with your teams is very important. And I think besides that, I would also add it's important to be data driven and understand how to, look at and analyze data in order to make key business decisions. And I would also add, kind of goes hand in hand with the empathy part, but I think being a good listener is also super important. So I think those are, if I had to identify about five, I think those are, what I would say are pretty important elements of being a good CX leader.
Those are all really great pillars to build on. I think you even might have just wrote a little bit of a college course outline right there for CX. That's pretty great. I think just to kind of give that outline, I think, and sort of a great, I think, segue and kind of themes I think we'll kind of touch on throughout this conversation here. So I think definitely coming back to some of these as we kind of progress through this conversation. But for folks listening now, let's kind of move in so we kind of understand a little bit more philosophy, what makes a great leader. Let's talk about building a CX team now, and sort of folks listening who maybe are either already in a team that's built out, or maybe even just trying to build out a team for the very first time. So for folks listening who might be struggling to build a high performing customer experience team, or, again, have never done so before, where do we start? Like, what are the things that really need to be top of mind as we're kind of thinking about this?
Yeah, I think it's really important that when you're either building out a team or hopefully maintaining a good team, I think it's super important that you have employee buy-in. And so one thing that I was proud that I did when I first joined was I kind of worked with the team and the leadership team specifically to figure out like, hey, what do we want our core values to be? And so we all threw out some ideas out there, and then we eventually just ended up anonymously voting on, hey, like, what do we want our team core values to be? Like, of course, you have your company core values, most do, but like, hey, let's take it a step further. Let's have our own department core values. And of course, there can be plenty of overlap with maybe your company core values, but something I think that's important to establish a winning culture, not only in CS or CX, but like in anything, as a former athlete, when you're talking about what kind of culture do you have as like a team, I think it's important that these are not something that's decided by your coach. It's, decided by the team, right? Because you're the ones who are actually performing whatever needs to be performed. And so we had basically voted on our team core values, and I'm really proud of that because it's something that we remind ourselves of every day, And so we have a fun little acronym for our core values. So I like to remind myself it's truthfully, I'm really customer centric, and that stands for the T is for teamwork. The I is for integrity. Truthfully, I'm really. The R is for respect. And then the final two C's are commitment and communication. So our
I love
5
that.
team core values are teamwork, integrity, respect, communication, and commitment. And we remind ourselves of those, throughout every shift. And when times are going, when times are good, when times are hard, it's really important to have those core values that, your team can reflect upon. And again, because these are things that we all agreed upon collectively. This was not something I came in and said, hey, here's our core values you have to follow. And I think that's part of being an effective leader is making sure that you're getting buy-in and commitment. And that was something that we did to kind of help maintain our good culture was, hey, let's establish some core values that we can really reflect on.
I think that that is such a great way to think about getting buy-in from the entire team and creating that connectedness to those 5 values too. And then also like how those themes kind of ladder up to, yeah, the day in, day outs when things are good, when things are bad, and sort of also just to kind of carry this kind of connectedness to, the team at large too, and then kind of feeling like they have a stake in the team as well. I think that's a really great way to think about getting started. And that culture, yeah, I mean, it's definitely like, something that, is really commonplace in sports, but even like in work environments too, culture can be the great multiplier, I think, in like what creates a high performing team. So I'm curious to unpack that a little bit more, but I want to segue as we're talking about building teams here and really like getting started. And I think one of the most admirable things about Pura Vida, there's a lot of things that we could talk about, but I think is that you support artisans, all around the world in countries like Costa Rica, Guatemala, India, etc. And I know during our initial kind of pre-interview here, you discussed how Pura Vida's taken a similar approach to outsourcing the customer experience team to countries like the Philippines, for example. I know that there are some polarizing opinions about this. For example, folks might think it's purely an opportunity to save money, or maybe the brand doesn't care about the experience. But I know you have a totally different experience on this, and I would love to get your thoughts on, how do you, can you share your thoughts about maybe how you outsource the CX team, and what does that even look like for you and for the Pura Vida team as well?
Yeah, definitely. You make a good point. It's interesting in that a lot of our customers love that we support artisans from around the world in those countries that you touched upon. But I'm also proud of the fact that we outsource, and we outsource a great team in the Philippines, and we provide great employment for them too. And like you said, I think sometimes, unfortunately, there can be a negative stigma surrounding outsourcing that it's strictly to save money, and that the people who are answering these tickets or conversations, as we call them, don't care, that they're not as invested, that it's more of a numbers driven game. And in my experience working with this team, that's far from the truth. Our team is really passionate about what they do, and they care a great deal about our customers and making sure that we're successful. And I will say, whether you have an in-house team or an outsourced team, I think if you focus too much on the numbers, that's not always a great key to success, right? You want to focus on quality and making sure that, you're providing customers with a great experience, and, the interactions are very positive and memorable. And yeah, so we've had a great outsource partner for the past 5 years now. We work with a BPO called Awesome OS, and they do a great job at helping to really facilitate and maintain a world-class culture that's, has, the employees are very proud to work for them and work for Pura Vida. And, we've had a great partnership. And, when you talk about us working together for the past 5 years, I'm proud that our average tenure is now over 3 years, so we have people who, it's not a plug and play and we constantly have turnover. I think in 2022 alone, we only lost one of our advocates. And for perspective, we have about a team of 25. So, I think off the top of my head, math's not my strong suit, but that's about a 96% retention rate for employees. And I think that's a huge key to having a good customer success team, is making sure that your, retention is high, turnover is low, because any manager will tell you they don't want to constantly have to be, um, looking for candidates, interviewing candidates, onboarding candidates, training candidates. And then, I've been in some cultures where there is high turnover and it's not really fun. You look around wondering who's next. Is someone going to accept a different job? Is someone going to transfer departments? And so I'm really proud of the team culture that we have. And I know sometimes, people think that outsourcing is strictly to save money, but I would argue that sometimes, by doing so, it's not about necessarily the savings, but it's about having people that are really passionate about what they do and really good at what they do. And I know from my team's experience that they're very passionate about what they do, and they're very, very good at it too.
I love that. And 96%, that is phenomenal. Congratulations. Hats off to you for that. That is truly remarkable, I think, to see. And I think all the points you brought up are really, really true, I think, in this kind of debate as well. And something that I know you mentioned too, as we were chatting a little bit about this off camera, was about also just the commitment and being able to have folks kind of staffed around the clock too, to be able to provide that support and really keep a low, time to first response. So I'm curious, has that also been kind of true for you as you kind of think about too, like being able to have folks kind of on to interact with your customers at kind of, all hours of the day, really?
Yeah, it's super important for us. I think, there's so many metrics that you can measure in customer success, but whenever I'm speaking with my boss, Paul, who's one of our co-founders and our CFO, I think average first response is usually one of the first ones that he's asking about. He's not asking, hey, what's the CSAT, or hey, what's our first contact resolution rate? It's always like, hey, how are the response times looking? And I think at this day and age, customers do expect pretty timely responses, and that's something that we focus a lot on, and we're very strategic in when we staff and schedule and have people available on the right channels. And so, yeah, I'm happy to say that we do have people who work 24/7, 365. We have people who work, of course, the primary day shifts, but then we do have people who work what we call the swing shifts, where they're logging on towards the end of the day shift, and they'll work, for a few hours. And then we have people who work the overnight shifts as well. Of course, we have a few folks who work the weekends. And of course, we do our best to accommodate people's preferences as to when they work. But yeah, it's very important for us to offer, very quick response times and be available on not just one channel, but, I'm happy that we have email channel, we have live chat, we have social as well, and so it's important to not only have a few channels where people can contact us, but also, like you said, making sure that our staffing allows for people to get those responses on holidays, on weekends. Sometimes, we'll see comments. People are so surprised they get a response at the wee hours of the morning. But again, that's something that can help differentiate our support from our competitors, and something that, we're really proud to offer.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely a big, kind of driver of value for the customer too, to be able to have a great experience, whenever they really need to reach out to the Pura Vida. It's awesome. And I'm curious, so to kind of talk a little bit about hiring, you had touched on that. What qualities do you think then make for a great CXT member, and how are you making sure that you're getting the right people on the bus?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and there's a lot that goes into it. But for me, the three things I look for, I'd say, I want to know if you have a strong work ethic, right? Let's face it, customer service can be tedious at times, and it really requires someone who's has a strong work ethic and can be very diligent, and what can be oftentimes somewhat repetitive, right? If the expectation is for you to be working 8 hours, and of course you get your breaks and whatnot, but a lot of time is just involved answering customer inquiries. And in order to do so, you need to have a strong work ethic. So that's one of them. I think having a good student mentality and being coachable is also one as well. So there's a lot to learn when you're, being trained to become what we call advocates on our team. There's a lot that goes into it. You have to learn things that maybe you're not familiar with. Shopify in itself, there's a lot that goes into Shopify. And then you think about learning your help desk, and you think about all the products that you offer, and you think about all the SOPs that we have. So I think you have to be a good student, and be someone who can take good notes and digest a lot of information quickly. So that's another one. And then I would also add just having a positive attitude. I think having a positive attitude is so important in any aspect of life, really. But I think in customer service, that's especially true because, let's face it, as much as we try, sometimes there are upset customers, whether it's our doing or, someone just having a bad day. So I think you also need to have a positive attitude and be able to overcome sometimes when, customers do become upset or maybe, are not as polite as we'd like. So, just being able to keep that positive attitude and, after one negative interaction, move on and just remember that, there's plenty of other customers who still need to be helped. And it's our job to always maintain that positive attitude. So to recap, I like looking for people with strong work ethics. I like having people with great student mentalities and who are coachable. And I think also, like I just mentioned, just having a positive attitude. Of course, there's many other things that we look for, but I think if I had to identify three, those are ones that I tend to look for when, interviewing candidates.
Those are all really strong things to look at for sure. And I think about my time, on the brand side, and a lot of the CS agents that we worked with, some of the best ones embodied all of those. And I think also like being just a great student and learning, like there's a lot of things I think that are, you have to kind of get in the seat to really learn, but having that mentality of just, learning Shopify, learning, how to be, a better communicator. All of these things can be, skills that you can just embrace. I think those are all super important things that you kind of touched on. I love that. You touched on these core values or sort of things that you think about, just broader with the team. But I'm curious, like, if there are sort of any core tenants or things that you think about when you go into kind of fostering a high performance CX environment.
Yeah, well, one, I like to make it clear for any of our employees that I very much have an open door policy. And much like we rely on customer feedback in order to make a better customer experience, I rely on employee feedback to make a better experience, So anytime anyone at any level, whether you're the highest senior most person on the team or today is your very first day on the job, like I want to hear about how we can make your experience better, right? Of course, within reason, there's only so much money that can be invested, or but we do our very best to accommodate. So I think having frequent and open communication, or as I call it, kind of an open door policy, is super important. And I think that in itself kind of just shows like a level of trust and respect, a mutual trust and respect, where like, hey, you can come to me with any thoughts, ideas that you have, and nothing is frowned upon, nothing is going to be shut down. Like it's just, we're a team. I want to make your experience as positive as it can be, and so I rely on your feedback. So I think open and frequent communication is super important. I also think having some friendly competition is great. So like I'm excited. We have our team-wide meeting later today, and something that we always do is we have our advocates of the month, right? So for each respective channel, we like to identify who we think is the advocate of the month. And we're not only looking at the numbers, of course, which are very important, but we also tie it into our core values and like, hey, who has displayed great teamwork, or who's showed great integrity, or who's shown great respect, communication, commitment. And we always tie in not only the numbers, which are very important, but also, how did someone display these core values that are so important to us. So I think friendly competition in CS is very important too. We post our statistics every day, and many times throughout the shift, we'll even post an update on how many conversations have been solved, like CSAT scores. So I think as myself as an agent, I like to be competitive, and I think like, hey, I see so and so has like better numbers than me. Like I need to up my game. So I think fostering friendly competition is also important in CS, especially given how it can be repetitive, and sometimes you deal with upset customers, which is not fun. So I like having an environment where there's friendly competition. And I would also just say, I think at this day and age, especially, it's super important to maintain like a safe space, and we don't discriminate against people of any background or gender or sexual preference or any political opinions, just being able, and again, that kind of ties into our core values, right? One of which being respect. So regardless of anything, we're all humans, we all share a common goal, so I think at this day and age, really just having like a safe space where everyone feels comfortable to be themselves and there's no judgment. Everyone's treated equally, I think is super important. And then I would also say I do my best to really be flexible with people in terms of preferred schedules, preferred channels. Do you prefer working at home? Do you prefer working in the office? Do you want to work weekends? And even just being like understanding about like sometimes last minute things come up. Hey, I'm really sorry. I know it's our busiest time of the year. My daughter's really sick. Like, do you think I can have a day off? Like, I always remind the team that this is a job and it's really important for what we do, but we spend most of our time outside of work and you guys have lives outside of work. And I hope that as much as I want your commitment to this job, I don't want your job to be the most important thing in your life. And, just reminding people that go spend time with your loved ones, like take a day off, you deserve it, taking good care of your mental health and well being. That stuff will always, always come first to me before work. Frankly, if your mental health isn't good, you're not going to be performing very well at work. And again, I care more about you as a person than I do an employee. So just making our employees know that, at the end of the day, this is a small part of your life. It helps pay the bills. It's important. But I realize there's far bigger things and more important things in your lives than work. And, just having that understanding with the team, I think is super important.
Those are all really important things to think about for sure. And I love that really are looking after the team too. I think in making them feel empowered and that friendly competition can go such a long way. I think in you touched on earlier even too, kind of like making sure that they have buy-in and kind of voice in some of these kind of core values, and then bringing that further to feeling like they've invested in Pura Vida as well, and then the mission and what you're really trying to deliver to customers. That's all really, really great stuff. I love all of that. And I think we've talked a lot about like kind of the kind of conceptual stuff now and kind of how to really think about building this environment. I'm curious, and this can sort of, I think, vary by team, but like on the tools side of things, are there any tools that you think are really necessary to enabling, the team to be high performing and making sure that they're delivering a consistently great customer experience? So obviously a help desk, but I'm curious if anything else kind of goes into that conversation as well.
Yeah, well, we do partner with Stella Connect for our customer satisfaction and customer effort surveys and really just post interaction surveys. And I would say that tool I probably use more than any other tool in my day to day. So I have Stella pulled up, and it's really nice the way like their stream works in live time on the dashboard. I'll get new customer feedback as it comes in. And I love seeing all the 4 and 5 star reviews and the feedback, and it's great. But when I see that 1 star review come in and it's a red flag and I see it, that's what interests me more because I want to see what is the customer upset about. Was it our wrongdoing or was it something to do with something out of our control, like a carrier or something that's not directly something that I can control, I guess, if you will. So we use Stella Connect in terms of getting a lot of post interaction surveys and data that I think is super important to us. Besides that, we do use Delighted for our Net Promoter Score or NPS survey. Again, very important. That I think is not just necessarily customer service, but it's kind of really just brand in general, right? Because when I'm
Sure.
reviewing that, it's not just strictly service related, but hey, like I like the price of your products, or I love how you support charities, or I love how you support artisans. And it's really more of just like kind of gauging the brand health rather than just strictly service related. But again, I'm not a customer service manager. I'm a customer success manager, and that's customer feedback. Now, again, some of it I can act on in my department, and other times I might need to say, hey, our e-commerce manager, someone was complaining about having a tough time navigating the website. Like, do you think we can look into this? Or, hey, for our web developer, like someone was saying that they were having trouble, finishing checkout. Like, can we make sure that everything is working well with our payment processors and checkout? So I think that's super important to have a net promoter survey. And we have a few other sources for surveys as well, like Trustpilot. We'd like to stay pretty up to date with how customers are responding to that. And then besides that, you touched on earlier, I know you're Attentive alumni. So we do partner with Attentive for SMS. And while that's mostly marketing and acquisition, we do read the reviews that customers will put in. So, I think it's important to monitor that stuff too, in case people didn't receive their package or they have any other feedback they want to share. Um, and then besides that, I think having a post-purchase tool is really important, so of course, Wonderment being one of them, but, having just something that allows customers to track, I think on average, post-purchase customers track their order as many as 3 times on average. So having a tool that really allows customers to track their order, that's a huge lifesaver for our team so that customers aren't asking, the notorious "where's my order" question. And then besides that, we do also use AI and automations through our partners at Thankful AI. So Thankful's been really, really a great partner for us over the last few years, and especially this time of year with customers asking the notorious "where's my order" question when they receive their order. God forbid if any item is missing or damaged. Thankful is able to automate, I'd say, anywhere between 10 to 15% of our inbound conversations. So it's definitely a huge part of our success, and we're really thankful to have them in our tech stack as well.
That's awesome. I love all those different tools to kind of create that kind of cohesive experience. But then also, like you touched on the feedback side of it, surveying customers, being able to look at that, the NPS stuff as well, and measuring and kind of assessing things over time. And I'm sure all contribute to really making sure that the team maintains like high performance, but also be able to be enabled to do all those things as well. So that's a great tech stack. I love that kind of approach to it as well. So we talked a lot about, kind of the building. I think you even touched on a lot of maintaining as well. But I think one of the questions I had before we kind of move into a little bit more of the Pura Vida approach to things as well is, you've talked, about, a lot of the best practices, but for folks listening who might not have a highly motivated or empowered CX team, what sort of advice might you offer to them to kind of think about and start to kind of change the ship a little bit?
Yeah, well, one, I know I touched upon it earlier in the interview, but you got to get employee feedback, so just constantly asking the team, and whether you want to just have, like just Zoom calls with your team and collect feedback through that method, or if you prefer anonymous surveys. We have a tool that we use called Office Vibe, and it basically sends out surveys. I think we have it set up for every 2 weeks right now, but I'm sure you can adjust the timing. And it's just, routinely asking questions. And even though the questions are kind of repetitive, like, hey, we want to know, like, do you feel like you have all the tools for success? Do you feel like you're well compensated? If you were to leave, what would be the primary motivator to do so? So I think just like we rely on customer feedback to, make improvements to the customer experience, I think getting constant feedback from your employees is an easy way to hopefully improve your employee experience, which I think is so significant to delivering a good customer experience. They're directly related. If you have a team that has frequent turnover, I guarantee you they're not going to, be in the same position to obtain success as a team that has, great retention, low turnover. And then, I think when you talk about this question, I think it's also super important as managers to know when to delegate, right?
Mhm.
As soon as someone, you're able to effectively train someone to do some main responsibilities, like I like to delegate as frequently as possible. And it's not because I don't want to do the work or because I'm looking to cut corners. It's like I like to empower my team by giving them key responsibilities. And if they need help, if they need some hand holding or some questions, I'm more than happy to be there for them. But I think it's super important that you're delegating some key responsibilities, and that's a great way to empower your team as well. So trust your people until they give you a reason not to. And I think part of being an effective manager is really being able to do what you do well, but then being able to train others to do it and eventually take that off your plate as well. So over the years, I've been proud that we've been able to kind of continue to find new ways to give responsibilities to, so that the team's not working all day in the queue. As an agent myself previously, like it stinks when you spend your entire shift just answering ticket after ticket after ticket. Now, of
Mhm.
course, during peak season, sometimes that needs to be the case, but like, I think just about every full-time member on our team has at least one or two side projects that they do to help contribute to the overall health of our customer experience, and not just answering tickets, but like, hey, can someone please check out the reviews that we have on our website, strictly product reviews? Like, hey, can someone check our post purchase reviews? Can someone check this? And, just making sure that you're giving people responsibilities that allow them to feel empowered and feel trusted.
Definitely. I think that empowerment is so huge. I think you talked about a lot about that today already, but giving, kind of an ownership, I think, in sort of like their roles and responsibility, being able to take on some additional projects as well. But then also like I think what you mentioned on the health check of just how they're feeling about, the state of their employment, and giving the feedback opportunity to voice some of those things. I know in past roles that I've had, even we've done similar things, and it's been really great to learn about like the health of the internal business, and then where are the opportunities that might exist to improve things even further. I think it's an iterative process for sure. But that's all really fascinating stuff. I know, we could continue to talk for a while about sort of the building and maintaining side of it, but I think a lot of themes that we've kind of talked about already is, getting that buy-in, getting the empowerment of your entire team, and then being able to equip them with a lot of, just sort of things that make them successful in their role. A lot of things that we talked about already. I love all of it, and I'm curious now to kind of dive in a little bit further on the Pura Vida side. You've touched a lot on this already, but would love to understand a little bit more about the kind of what is the CX approach sort of like over at Pura Vida when you think about like some of the core things that you're kind of really making sure you want to keep top of mind with the team? Could you just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, what I'd say, I guess, so to clarify, we're talking about like, Pura Vida's kind of approach to CX, right?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. One thing that I remind the team is like we interact with customers online. So much of communication is body language. And that's something that, unfortunately, when you're emailing or chatting or DMing someone on social, like you don't have that ability to show your body language and your smile and approach them. So I always remind the team, like, hey, when we're interacting with customers, like make sure to show your personality too, right? Like, of course, we have shortcuts or macros, whatever you like to call them, and they're a tool that you should absolutely utilize for efficiency, making sure our responses are aligned, setting proper expectations. But when you talk about like Zappos customer support, one thing that they're very well known for is like, hey, it doesn't matter how long the conversation goes on, like we want you to show your human side and show your personality. And Zappos is like, I think one of, if not the most admired CX brands out there, right? And
Mhm.
so obviously we're going to see what they're doing well and look to replicate it. So I just remind the team, like, please, like, we don't have the benefit of showing our body language and smiles when we're emailing or chatting customers. So please show your personality. Do not use canned responses every time you interact with the customer. Like, throw in some emojis, throw in GIFs, like, do whatever you can to show your personality, and that whoever is reading this on the other side of the email is not just like a robot, and it's not like a canned response. Like, we want to show our personality as often as possible and just make it so when customers are interacting with us, I remind the team, like, hey, treat it like you would if you were in a retail store and a customer walked in. Like, you would walk over, you would greet them, you'd have a smile, you'd ask if you can help them, what brought you into the store today. So especially now that we have 5 retail stores, I always like to remind them, like, hey, treat this as if a customer walked into your store. And when someone emails you, that's them stepping foot into the door. And we want to do our best to show our personality, and also kind of create that emotional connection with customers too, right? Where you can deliver a good response and it's a shortcut that you didn't put any effort into other than just finding the right shortcut, responding with it, and being on your way. But take that extra time to throw in some emojis or a GIF, or create your own sign off, right? Like, I don't want everyone using the same sign off like best or like regards. Like,
Mhm.
hey, we're Pura Vida, we're a laid back brand. Like, do cheers or do Pura Vida, or like say like happy Friday, have a good weekend, and just make it so when you're reading it, like as a customer, you say, oh, this Blake guy has a good personality, or like, oh, that was really cool. Like, I've never had like a customer service team send me a GIF before. Like, they've got a sense of humor. Like, that's pretty cool. So doing our best to essentially make it so without the body language, we're creating memorable experiences for customers, and hopefully, getting that emotional connection and showing our personality and sense of humor when we're interacting with customers through these digital channels that we offer.
That's really, really great stuff. I think you definitely you are absolutely right when you say too. It's sort of creating some of these different just connection points to humanizing the experience. I think at the end of the day, like the gifs and the emojis and this the little even the sign offs as well. Like that's really great stuff to break through a little bit. I know like everyone points to Zappos, but it's a really great example of like, they really try to build the relationship with the customer, I think, in those conversations. And those are the things I feel like as a customer, I would pull away and be like, wow, they really, went above and beyond to create that connection. It wasn't just a transactional conversation, but there was a person on the other end of this as well, which is really cool.
Yeah, and one thing I think if there could be one takeaway that I'd like to give the audience, especially for any CX leaders out there, one of the best things I think that we've done is we actually, in efforts to make sure that this was like non-negotiable, we just put a criteria in our quality assurance process that said, hey, you need to personalize your interaction or else you're getting docked. So every week at the end of the week, when you get your QA scores, like you have incentive built in order to make sure if you want a passing QA score, like part of that includes personalizing your interactions. So every time it's Friday, my expectation is like, hey, we have a bunch of like little shortcuts that just say like happy Friday, have a good weekend, or like this time of year, like happy holidays. Thanks
Mhm.
for choosing Pura Vida. We appreciate your business. So yeah, I mean, if you haven't done so already, that might be an easy fix that CS leaders can do and just, hey, build it into your quality assurance grading where personalization matters that much.
That's really great. I think also that kind of goes back to, I think also we talked about motivation and making sure the team, feels that sort of connectedness to, everyone kind of motivating each other to, I think, kind of have those personalized opportunities and conversation too. That's really great, I think, to kind of have as a takeaway as well to, folks who might be thinking about how to really create that higher performing team. And this is sort of bouncing around, but as a question I really wanted to ask you, sort of you talked about, when you joined Pura Vida and sort of like when you began to, serve the team, that kind of you coming on two plus years ago now. I'm curious, like, what was the state of customer experience like at Pura Vida when you joined the team? And how did you really approach ramping up and making sure that as you were joining, too, that the team morale really stayed high during this time of transition?
Yeah, well, I was really fortunate to inherit a great team, so I didn't have to come in and completely rebuild anything from scratch. The former manager, Nick, who I now consider to be a great friend and mentor and someone I have a great, deal of respect for, he really was key to turning around the culture and he did so many wonderful things. I mean, we could have a whole separate podcast about all that Nick did to really build the culture and set the expectations. But, when I started, he left me a 55-page PDF, tons of information, basically everything you could imagine about CX at Pura Vida. But I'll never forget one of the first things in the PDF was he basically said, like, you're inheriting a team that's close like a family, and your main responsibility above everything else that you do is continuing to foster the culture and taking care of the people. Like you're their leader, they look up to you, they're gonna look for you for guidance and direction. And it's super important that above everything else that you do, regardless of tech stack or how you manage the budget or, what partners you choose or any other changes you want to make, like at the end of the day, you need to take care of the team and the people. And that's been something that, I'm reminded of every day is, just taking care of the team and making sure that we're delivering a good employee experience. Cause again, I think it directly ties into having a positive customer experience. Um, but yeah, with that said, when I did take over the team, it was September of 2020. So we were 6 months into the pandemic. The entire team was working from home. They're a close knit group. They have an amazing office, but everyone's working from home. We're not physically together. They had about 2 months when before I was hired. So there was about a 2 month period where they didn't have a formal manager, and they're just taking care of business as usual. Of course, my boss, Paul, who I report to, was filling in and doing his best to make sure that, they had a person to contact for any escalations or assistance. But yeah, I mean, at the time, it's a pandemic. They were working from home. They didn't have a manager, a lot of uncertainty in the world, just, crazy times. So when I joined, again, it was just kind of a big focus on getting in, learning the team, learning the people, obviously learning the ropes that goes into, what Pura Vida had from a tech stack perspective and how to deliver a good customer experience. And but yeah, ultimately I came in and just wanted to learn about them and their culture and how I can, be a servant leader to them and make sure that I'm providing them with the tools and resources that they need to be successful, and not only successful in their jobs, but just like happy with what they're doing. And so yeah, it was crazy to think it's been a wild 2 years, but yeah, at the time when I joined, there was a lot of I guess maybe change, uncertainty, and like I said, I was fortunate to inherit a great team. And once I kind of learned them and their needs and wants, the rest was kind of just making sure that I was doing the best that I could to give them all the resources necessary to be successful.
Yeah, major hats off to you, I think, in the approach. I think, and as we've talked throughout this conversation, you've definitely, I feel like, continued that to carry on that tight knit family, as you mentioned. When you joined, that was the state of a team, and continuing on and really building. I think also, just maintaining and building that high performing team. It's definitely, I think, a testament to your leadership style, and really, really just appreciate you kind of sharing more about that as well. And I'm curious to jump around again, but ask you another question I really wanted to ask, because I feel like this is really important and something I wanted to come back to as well. Was you talked a lot about feedback and aggregating some of these different forms of feedback from customers, whether they're on live chat, texting in, emailing, all these different things. Um, and you mentioned even in our pre-interview how you've really doubled down on the negative feedback to look for areas of opportunity for the business. And so, can you talk more about how then you take action on that? You talked about, going to the e-commerce manager, for example, or going to the website developer, but any sort of things you can maybe talk about on how you really make sure the negative feedback is actions taken on that.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you asked. Again, I think this is pretty common knowledge, and I'm sure many CS or CX leaders have heard this before. But, Bill Gates said his greatest source of learning is upset customers. And I think that's so true because, while we all love to pat ourselves on the back and read the positive feedback and reaffirm maybe what we're doing well, the best way to change is to see what are customers upset about. Is it price related? Is it post purchase? Was it delivery time frame? Was it response time? Did they not like certain policies that we have in place? And so I think the best way to improve is really just focusing on, what customers are telling you they don't love. Now, that's not to say that we can, make concrete changes for every piece of negative feedback that we get, right? Like, it's funny, some people might say, hey, your prices are too expensive. And then that's like one of our most common things that people love. Hey, you have great, reasonable prices, so of course, not all feedback can be stuff that we take action on, but
Sure.
if you notice, enough of it being said, then obviously, hey, we're getting a lot of people who say that X, Y, and Z could be improved. So, yeah, one thing that I think our team does exceptionally well, and again, I was lucky to inherit a team that already did this, so I wasn't the one who implemented it for transparency, but I thought it was so cool when I joined. We have someone whose full time job is service recovery. So any negative interactions we get, their job is just to go in and try and recover the interaction. So we'll see someone who left a low star review. We have someone come in and try and clean it up and just, again, whether it's policy related, like, hey, I went over the 30-day return window. I'm not satisfied that you're sticking by the policy and you won't let me return this product from September.
Mhm.
Okay, we'll make a one-time exception and try and recover that interaction. So yeah, I think it's super cool that we do have someone whose full time focus is really just making sure that we're following up on every negative interaction that we receive. Now, we can't recover all of them, but at this day and age, with acquisition costs being so darn expensive, I will fight tooth and nail to try and recover every customer that we can. And you know what? Even if maybe we can't turn a 1 star interaction into a 5 star interaction, at least we care enough to follow up and just show the customer, like, hey, we're sorry you had this experience. We're sorry you feel that way. And again, we'll try and make things right. Now, it doesn't always work that way, but again, at least it shows that we care enough to really follow up and do our best to try and recover those interactions. And even if it's maybe not necessarily service related, but we notice a low score on our NPS survey, again, we'll follow up with the customer, acknowledge their feelings and concerns. And if it's stuff that I can directly control, I'll try and take action on it. If it's stuff for other departments to be aware of, I'm at least going to pass that feedback along. We owe it to not only our customers, but to the brand as a whole. Like, again, my title is customer success manager. So any piece of feedback that comes from a customer, I don't expect people in other departments to sift through that. So my job is to let people know in other departments, hey, here's what a customer thinks. Can we make any improvements to this? And we have been fortunate enough to make some of those changes throughout the years, just again through listening to the customers and relaying the feedback to the appropriate decision makers.
I love that you have someone just dedicated to just really diving deeper and figuring out, like, can we save this? Can we get some feedback? Can we really just learn from this? All of those things I think are so, so foundational. And the feedback loops that you've created across, other parts of the business too, I think are, I think a testament to also like how you can improve, I think, the process for the whole business too. Like, I think that's the beauty of CX, is that like you have the opportunity to really learn from the customer and then make that experience better. And then I think also something else I was thinking of as you were saying this was the more I've talked to, other leaders, they've kind of mentioned, even if we can't save the customer, then we can at least provide a great experience and sort of leave them with an impression that the brand really cares about the experience at the end of the day. And even if they decide that, the brand wasn't for me, maybe they refer it to another friend because they just really thought that it was a great experience. Even if it wasn't the fit for them, that there still is, a really great experience that this brand can offer and deliver to their customers. So I think those are all really, really great things that you touched on there. And as we kind of put a bow on this conversation, I think so much ground has been covered. But I'm curious if you just have, and I'm sure there could be a lot of things you could touch on, but what has been your biggest lesson learned in leading and serving the CX team here at Pura Vida?
Yeah, I touched upon it earlier, but I think I can't emphasize enough how important it is as a leader to really focus on your people first and foremost, right? And just making sure that, you're doing everything you can to give them a great workplace and reduce retention and give them, career development opportunities. So one thing that I'm really happy that we offer is we have like a leadership book club. So we've read 3 different books this year where, just take some time out of your shift and let's dive in and read a few chapters and then we'll meet and talk about it. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is, I think, as leaders to really try and focus first and foremost on a positive employee experience, taking care of your people and fighting every day to make sure that they know how valued, respected, and cared for they are, and continuing to do that so that, when it comes to, hey, we need some people to work overtime this weekend, we have plenty of volunteers. And again, I think having a great employee experience is a key to having a great customer experience. So I'd say for me, the biggest lesson is really just to focus on your people. And it's something that requires a lot of work too. It's not something you can do periodically or when it's convenient. It has to be like day in and day out, and constantly reinforcing positive behavior and coaching and having one-on-one discussions, and also taking interest in like people's personal lives outside of work if they're so willing to share. I understand
Sure.
there's certain boundaries and certain things that maybe you shouldn't inquire about, but like for me, I have a good idea about anyone on my team who's a parent. I know their kids' names, I know what they like to do outside of work, I know who likes to hang out with who, what you like to do in your free time, what kind of music you like listening to, who's into Harry Potter, places you've traveled and been, and just kind of really developing these personal relationships with your team too. Of course, within reason and certain boundaries. And some people are, more willing to share stuff about their personal lives, but just, developing, great relationships with your employees, I think is always a key in any industry to, having a successful team.
That I think I couldn't have said it better myself. And I think it kind of, comes back to where we started this conversation, really around building culture and making sure that it's a place that, your team wants to be and feels empowered, and that there is, a sense of family. And I think you touched on that as well. So I think all really, really great points, Dan. This has been just, I think, a masterclass in really how to think about the philosophies and culture that you want to build and maintain with the CX team. So I super appreciate you sharing all this information with us in the audience. So as I think about this, before I let you go, I wanted to ask you one last question. And as we kind of think about 2023, we're planning here right now, I'm sure. What are you most excited about for the next year at Pura Vida?
Yeah, I think for us, it's bridging the gap between our online presence and our retail stores. So in 2021, we opened our flagship location, like you touched upon, at UTC. For those not familiar, that's a mall in La Jolla. California, where Pura Vida is based out of. This past year, we've been fortunate enough to open 4 additional retail stores, one in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. We've got one in the Gilbert Chandler, Arizona area. We have an outlet store in Camarillo, and then we also opened another location in Irvine, a suburb of Los Angeles. And without any spoilers, and frankly, I'm not really sure if anything's finalized, but we're going to be opening a few more retail stores in the future. And right now, we don't offer omni-channel returns and exchanges, for example. And so I think I'm excited to work with IT and the right stakeholders in terms of bridging the gap between our online presence and our retail presence, and just giving customers a great experience where you can buy online and return in stores, or purchase online and pick it up in a store. And so we're really excited about our retail presence, but we've got a few things to iron out, because at this day and age, we want to make sure that we're giving customers the best experience possible. So I'm looking forward to that. And as a follow-up, I'm also excited. Next year, I think we're going to be really formally expanding our SMS support. So we did launch SMS support. Right now, we offer it to a few hundred customers who we've deemed to be VIP. And the reason being, we don't want to become too overwhelmed with volume. This time of year is already crazy enough as is. And it's crazy. Most of our orders, well over 50% of our orders, actually come from mobile. So I think, you talk to most industry experts and leaders, I think SMS is definitely a growing channel. And I think next year I'm excited to, open it to the general public and all of our customers in general. I think that'll be a very, very successful channel for us. So next year, I'm excited to bridge the gap between our retail presence and website. And I'm also excited to launch SMS and just continue to find new and better ways to improve our customer experience.
All amazing things. So much happening, I think, there, and I'm really excited. Not only about the expansion opportunities that you're talking about here in store, but I've been super bullish on SMS as a support channel. If there are the resources there to provide that experience, and we'll have to have you back on the show again. Down the road to talk more about that, because I think that it'd be really interesting to hear your take on what that rollout has sort of been, and the impact that it's had in the business. I feel like it's still very early innings in where the SMS support channel is headed, I think, for DTC e-commerce.
Yeah, well, I'd love to hop back on anytime, and I look forward to revealing how all of our learnings with SMS. Right, anytime you launch a new channel, it's not always smooth sailing right away. So talk about learnings and hopefully have some good data, and obviously, at the end of the day, just improve our ability to communicate with customers through a very modern and convenient channel.
Absolutely. Well, as I let you go, where can listeners go to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm really active on LinkedIn, and of course, since this is mostly focused on professionalism and just work in general, I'm available on LinkedIn. So if you want to connect, you can certainly find me there. I'm also active in the Discord group. There's a Discord group where a lot of CX leaders live. So if you have any interest, maybe shoot me a message, and I can hopefully try and get you an invite in there as well. So I'd say those are probably the best 2 places to find me.
Awesome. And we'll link out to that in the show notes as well. But Dan, really appreciate all of the insight here in the conversation. It's been a blast to chat with you and talk about this. Have a great rest of the year if we don't talk before then. And we'll have to have you on the show again in 2023 for sure.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Blake. And thanks to every listener out there. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and hopefully had some good learnings. And happy holidays to everyone listening as well. Hope you have a great holiday season, and happy New Year.